Hi, this is video number 291. Weather here, very cool today, autumn-like, kind of breezy now. Sun's coming out a little bit, but we're supposed to get a lot of rain tomorrow, so the lawn needs mowed. I don't like to mow on Sunday for some reason. Thought about mowing yesterday, but I didn't, so I'm probably gonna have to skip at least until Tuesday, so it's gonna be extra long, so that's okay, that's okay. Eli did come yesterday afternoon, about noon actually, about lunchtime. It's just what I needed. It's just what I needed. Love that little guy. He was here and he did a lot of his like typical things. We did the Minecraft for about an hour or so. He had some little wooden cars that like you paint them and stuff. So he painted them, and he has this imagination, and there were little like sticker things, kind of. They're supposed to be like the windshield and the windows. Instead, he made them wings. Okay, so when he was done and the paint dried and stuff, I came upstairs and we were like pretending like we were flying in outer space and stuff. And he was shooting my car down and this and that. So that was a lot of fun. He has an incredible imagination. Right before he left, he was outside doing something and he found a cricket and he went crazy. So I came in and I got a container. It had a little salad in it before. It had a lot of garlic, apparently, and Italian dressing. So I came in, I cleaned it out real good. We put the cricket in there with some grass and stuff. But we left and went over to his house. And he was playing with it the whole time. He was on the way there. We got there and he gave me the thing, like to get the cricket out, and it was dead. It just was not, it did not move at all. So we decided we were going to have a burial. So we dug a little hole in the tan bark and we put the cricket in there and gave it a burial, did a little funeral service, said a little prayer for it to be in cricket heaven, and he went inside and made a little rest in peace sign. So there's an RIP sign in their tan bark right by the driveway. It's pretty funny. And then he wanted to look for other crickets, so I thought, well, we're not going to find any crickets. So I did actually find a couple slugs that we put in some sort of container. I forget what it was. So he had a couple slugs there. They're not as interesting as crickets though. So yeah, it was good. He was good. We picked him up. He came over here today for church, and he was real good at church too. He gets antsy, which he's got a lot of energy to begin with, and then sitting there while things are going on, and the kids have to sit in the service for the first about 15 minutes. Because they're singing and like it's a prayer and that. So he made it through. He was getting pretty antsy toward the end though. Also yesterday, right before we left to take Eli home, our neighbors across the street, they're having trouble with their garage door opener. So they had asked me to come over and like try to figure it out and stuff. So I was over there a while. I was with the wife. Okay, her name was Trudy. And we're messing around with it and stuff. We couldn't do it. I had to go, so I couldn't spend time. So, we took Eli home and came back, and she was out there again, and her husband was out there too. And he doesn't have real patience for something like that. He's a dentist, but he's not good with like having patience to do things around the house like that. So I was there, and I went in, and she was kind of like reading the instructions on the different things, like how to reset the remote controls and that. And so I was talking to her husband while we were in there, and she seemed to know exactly what to do, and she actually figured it out in about 5 minutes. And I think what's really strange is for some reason, and I don't know why, I have this calming effect on them. I don't understand that exactly, but he was all fidgety and stuff when I got there, and then I was talking to him, and we were kind of just like, okay, let's just relax here. Let's, step by step. And she did it all, really. I think maybe she just, I don't know. I just had this calming effect on it. It's pretty cool, but she got it figured out. Like the remotes work, the keypad on the side of the garage works, so they can get in their garage now without having to go in the house first. Okay, the thing with the funeral and all of that from the last couple of weeks, and the thing that disturbed me last night, well, yesterday, Saturday they decided they were going to all get together again for like a lunch, and I'm apparently the only one who declined. I didn't show up. It was like I was sort of boycotting it because I was upset about this thing about what was said about my mother and that. So anyway, my sister called in the evening and I talked with her a while, and she said everybody was there except you, and she wasn't upset or anything, but she's going back to Wisconsin. She was leaving this morning, but I got to talk to her. Somehow there was a point in our conversation where she was starting in on like so and so, one of our cousins said, and I cut in. It was like the perfect opening, and I just spilled everything. I was not harsh. I was not mean. I was very forceful, and I just kept talking, and I would not let her talk. She would try to get in a word here and there, and I just kept going. And that's not like me. It's usually the other way around. She's the one who takes control of conversations. But I got to say what I needed to say, and she understood exactly. I told her, like, the person who said this, although she's your cousin, you haven't seen her in like decades. I know her very well. My wife knows her very well. She's not the way you think she is. So kind of nipped that one in the bud, and we were good after that. Anyway, she was supposed to leave this morning. She's the one who would relate to the sister who passed away. They would talk like every week. She would come home once a year, meet at her place. We would meet there. So that's going to be a huge void for her, a gap in her life. So we have to figure out a way to fill it. I'm probably going to be the one who somehow fills that void. I'm not quite sure how that will go yet. I am thinking like maybe making trips out that way. She lives in a place called Fort Atkinson in Wisconsin. I'm thinking maybe I would go out at least as far as Chicago, maybe Rockford. Chicago's a couple hours from her. Rockford's an hour. Maybe I would stay there somewhere, and she could come. Like we could meet, kind of like part way. And I don't know. Instead of driving all the way up to Fort, I don't know. And maybe I could visit some of the people who live out around Chicago who are going through withdrawal. I know there are quite a few out in Illinois going through this. Not sure what we'll do yet, but take some time here. She gets over, the passing of her sister and that, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. I would kind of like to maybe make trips out there every so many months just to see her, because I know she's hurting. Her voice was cracking some as we were talking, and I know it hurts. It hurts. Okay, church today. Had my small group. It was real good. It was real good. So that went really well. Okay, I've been thinking about future videos. And I will always talk about emails and so forth that I get, discuss those. But I was thinking maybe my book, maybe I would every so often read a section of my book and then stop and discuss some of the stuff in it because it's relevant. And maybe in that way, like you could all hear the book. You wouldn't have to buy it then. We could just discuss it much the way I discuss other writings from the website. I don't know. It's an idea though, like to go through. I haven't read the book since I wrote it. I did read through the whole book. Well, I had to because I wrote it a few times, but I've never actually sat down and just read the book for, I don't know that you would call it enjoyment, for whatever, just to read the book. Writing it's kind of like, writing a book is kind of like reading a book. And if you get to a place where you don't like it, you can change it. You can change it around, change wording, change the scene, whatever. It is actually a fun thing to do. It was a lot of fun writing the book. So maybe that's what I'll do. Read some of the book and discuss it. And maybe one day I'll finish. It really should be followed up with, like, actually my benzo withdrawal. And I mean, the book kind of is like, it's sort of written from, at least part of it, for me being in the psych hospital, and it only gets to like my second day there. A lot of things happened during those 3 weeks that I would like to write about that might be relevant to some of you. Anyway, I got an email some time ago, and I'm not going to read it because I will just talk about like the subject basically. And this was from somebody who's taking gabapentin, who's in benzo withdrawal. And she had made a statement in one of her emails. She had read an article that gabapentin prevents neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is it's very important in our brains, in healing and so forth. And I will give, let me see, the definition of neuroplasticity. I'll start with that and then I'll backtrack here. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to form and reorganize synaptic connections, especially in response to learning or experience or following injury. Okay, the synaptic connections, that's like the gap between neurons. Like when neurons are together, there's this gap. It's called the synapse, the synaptic connection. It's also called a number of other things, but that's the synaptic area there. So anyway, she gave me a link to an article where she kind of got this prevents neuroplasticity idea. I'll read that and then discuss it a little bit. And then it also cites another article, which is a lot more technical, and I'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so the article that the link goes to, I'm going to read the relevant portion. Okay, there are many ways to keep your brain healthy, appearing regularly in the press. Okay, before I go on, the name of this particular article is Your Strategy for Neuroplasticity. Okay, there are many ways to keep your brain healthy, appearing regularly in the press. Dancing is great, and as is social activity, and of course mental challenges. Play Lumosity, which is a game on the web. Learn a new language, take up a new sport. All of these suggestions are excellent, and of course you will choose among those the one or ones that suit you best. Okay, this is for neuroplasticity, to make your brain more and more neuroplastic. We can do the same with supplementation and prescription medication. Attend to the known effects of what has been suggested to us and figure out for ourselves if it's a valuable aid or not. For instance, okay, here's where we get to the heart of this. For instance, let's talk about two commonly prescribed drugs, gabapentin and Lyrica, which is also generically pregabalin, Lyrica, both offered for relief of chronic pain syndromes. Both drugs interfere with the messages transmitted from nerves, and the intention is that they just interfere with pain messages. However, both medications have been studied to see whether they interfere with other nerve messages, such as thinking. A recent study, and I have a link to this later, identified the specific receptor activity of gabapentin and clarified that the drug activity seems to include blockade of new synapses, which are nerve communication pathways formation, synaptic formation, and thus impair our neuroplasticity. Lyrica is also prescribed as an anticonvulsant, and in this study was found to impair cognitive performance, as do many other anticonvulsant medications. Okay, now I'm going to talk about this a little bit, this article. Okay, at the beginning, for instance, let's talk about two commonly prescribed drugs. Okay, for example, these two. There are other drugs. They're simply citing a study about gabapentin here. They could easily have cited studies about other drugs, psychotropic drugs in particular. So what this means is they picked out two. They could have talked about many. They all have their own actions, effects on neurons, on the brain, on the central nervous system. And that should not be a surprise to anyone. And that's the reason most of you are getting off drugs. That's one of the reasons I got off drugs. They just happen to be picking out gabapentin here and Lyrica. Okay, so it's for instance, for example. They're not saying this one is the only one that does this, or these two. There are other drugs that do all kinds of unknown things, really unknown things to the brain. And these drugs, if they knew exactly what these drugs do to the brain, there would not be so many different reactions to the drugs. You would know exactly what's going to happen to you when you take one of these things. Okay, and I would contend that all drugs interfere to one extent or another with normal processes in our bodies, and not just psychotropic drugs. That's any drug. Any drug is going to interfere with what is normally supposed to be happening in your body. And the hope is that it's a medicine. It will create some positive effect in some way, but it's no secret that these drugs interfere with body processes in other areas of your body. They use the wording "seems to include," which is not definitive at all. It's a typical, I mean, I have reviewed hundreds of papers over my career like this, technical papers. It's the typical wishy-washy wording of studies. It's even used in drug commercials, not just like drugs. It's you watch most commercials. Is thought to do this. Is could help you. There was never an absolute statement. Even the chemical imbalance thing, they kind of is thought to be caused by a chemical. They don't usually make a definitive statement. That's because they don't know. Okay. Okay. Let me see. What's this one? Found to impair cognitive performance. That wording. Does that equal impaired neuroplasticity? I don't really think it does. Cognitive performance, your ability to think and reason and that sort of thing, to do calculations and that. Neuroplasticity has more to do with synaptic connections, forming them, creating them, okay? Okay, and anyway, it cites, okay, let me see what the wording was here. It cites another, so the recent study identified the specific receptor activity of gabapentin and clarified that the drug activity seems to include blockade of new synapse. It seems to include there, okay? It says a recent study here, okay? And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I read that. That's what we'll do here. Let me see. And I'll read the abstract of that first, okay? I'll read some of it. Some of it's like, I don't even understand. I would have to do a little research stuff. Okay, the abstract. Synapses are asymmetric cellular adhesions that are critical for nervous system development and function. Okay, it's the area between the presynaptic neuron and the postsynaptic neuron. It's like an area in there. It's a place, okay? But the mechanisms that induce their formation are not well understood, okay? Right there, first sentence. But the mechanisms that induce their formation are not well understood. Okay, they're not. So they're studying here to see like if they can find something out. That's the point of the study. We have previously identified thrombospondin as an astrocyte secreted protein that promotes CNS synaptogenesis. Okay. Thrombospondin is some sort of, I guess it's a probably an organic chemical. It's an astrocyte secreted protein, which is a protein. You know, astrocytes are located in the glia of the brain. That's the non-neuron part of the brain, okay? They're called astrocytes because they're like stars. They look like stars, I guess. And they promote CNS synaptogenesis, in other words, creation of these synapses, okay, between neurons. Here we identify the neuronal thrombospondin receptor involved in CNS synapse formation as, it gives the name, the receptor for the anti-epileptic and analgesic drug gabapentin. So gabapentin has something to do with this particular receptor. We show that another name, interacts with the epidermal growth factor like repeats common to all thrombospondins, okay, which is this protein. And overexpression increases synaptogenesis in vitro and in vivo, like in a living thing and in like a non-living environment, and is required post-synaptically for thrombospondin and astrocyte-induced synapse formation in vitro. Okay, that's sort of irrelevant to what I want to talk about. Gabapentin antagonizes thrombospondin binding to this receptor and powerfully inhibits excitatory synapse formation in vitro and in vivo. These findings identify this particular receptor involved in excitatory synapse formation and suggest that gabapentin may function therapeutically by blocking new synapse formation. Okay, so what they're saying is therapeutically, this blockage of this synaptic formation, that might be the therapeutic reason for gabapentin, and what I guess it's supposed to It has to do with like pain, more with pain than with what they're getting at here. Okay, to interpret some of this, okay, like what does this actually mean, what I just read? Okay, first of all, the previous article said it was a recent study. Well, it's not a recent study, it's 2010, that's 7 years old. Okay, neuroplasticity in this second study, and it's a long study, long drawn out study, the word is not even mentioned in the study. It doesn't even, it's not even given regard in that study. And it says in there, the mechanism is not well understood, and it's not. I mean, they're kind of making a guess here. They're trying to figure something out. It says gabapentin may function by blocking new synapse formation. They're saying that could be the case. They're not even saying that is the case. And that's the result of their study, you know, as being cited in the first thing I read. Okay, and also says that gabapentin is involved in excitatory synapse formation, okay, or that this particular, the thrombo compound that I had read about there, it's involved in excitatory synapse formation. If true, if gabapentin has something to do, if it blocks excitatory synapse formation, it could be a positive thing in withdrawal. Actually, I would think so, that it would mean that like that you were talking about excitatory neurons here, like the synapse between excitatory neurons. If it blocks that, there's going to be less firing of neurons, which means less excitation, which is a good thing in withdrawal. So, and I don't know that like they prescribe gabapentin for that reason, but I would take that away from this first before I would say, well, it certainly does not stop neuroplasticity. That is absolutely not true. And this particular receptor is not the only one involved in neuroplasticity and formation of synapses. That's certainly not the case. So what they're saying is, based on what they found, gabapentin may block this, which may have an effect on neuroplasticity. They're not even making a definitive statement. So it's just one of those things that's a study that was done, and they're trying to figure out what it is they found. But the thing I would take from it is, you know, if it is true, it's an excitatory, you're talking about excitatory neurons, less excitation if there is blockage, and that's a good thing in withdrawal. The brain is still extremely neuroplastic, even, you know, if you have gabapentin in there. It's neuroplastic in more ways than just this particular neuroreceptor. There are probably thousands of different kinds of neuroreceptors in the brain. This is just one of them, and they're not even saying conclusively that gabapentin blocks this. So it really is just someone wrote a very general kind of thing. Okay, what was the name of it? The name of the first, oh, it's way up here. Your Strategy for Neuroplasticity. Okay, so what they're trying to do is like help you as far as like things you can do to increase your neuroplasticity, like the synapses, the connections in your brain, make you smarter, more whatever. And they just happen to cite this thing because it just kind of, it doesn't, I don't even know why they cited this one. It's such a very non-definitive paper they're citing. I don't know why they did that. I'm not sure. But you know, what they're saying is this may be the case. They're not saying it is. And I highly doubt that it really is. It's not written in that way. It's not like one of those studies where the light bulb went on. I was like, this is absolute evidence that this is the case. That's not the way that paper is written. Okay, let me see where I'm at here as far as time. Okay, 24 minutes. I got a partial email here, and I had talked about this particular person sent me an email not too long ago, and I talked about, I think in the last video, she's the one that's cutting the Valium. Okay, last night I cut my Valium from 5 milligrams to 4.5 milligrams and have been revved up all day. The anxiety and fear are intense, and that's less than 24 hours after making the cut. I guess it was too big a cut, but I felt I had to do it to resume the taper. The tolerance withdrawal is horrible, and I felt like I couldn't wait any longer. Okay, I'm crying out to God to please help me. see. Let me know if you think I made a stupid move by cutting 0.5 milligram. No. As I've said before, there is no perfect way to taper, and you have to kind of do it at your own pace. And sometimes it's trial and error, and you do something that, like, well, maybe that was too much, maybe it wasn't enough, maybe cutting 0.5 mil, that's 10%. It's a 10% cut. My cuts were, I was doing 1/8 of a milligram from 1 milligram. So my cuts were like 12.5% every 2 weeks, except when I got close to the end, I actually did 12.5. The last 2 weeks, it was only a week between the cuts. So whatever works, whatever works. You're already in tolerance. Tolerance is miserable for this lady, I can tell. It was for me too. It is for most people. 0.5 milligram, like, to me, you wait and see how it goes. If the uptick in anxiety and fear starts to subside some, and you start to stabilize to the point where you just feel like the regular misery of withdrawal, tolerance withdrawal, then you think about, you stay there a while and you think, well, maybe I'll make another cut. And it could be, for a lot of people, it was not this way so much for me, but for people that I have read their stories and so forth, you get to that level that's kind of like your wall, and when you hit it, you know it. And so maybe then is when you start a micro taper, like a liquid micro taper. I don't know. We'll have to. It's trial and error. It's like you play it by ear. You can't. There is no perfect taper. A micro taper is not for everyone, but you don't want to cold turkey either. You don't want to go too fast. You kind of got to find a way to get you down to nothing, okay? To get you off, and to let, just being off, just jumping from that last little bit. There's a great psychological benefit to that, but you don't want to go too fast, but you don't want to spend more time in tolerance misery than you have to. So it's a hard thing to gauge. It really is. So cutting 10%, at one time is not necessarily a bad thing. Hopefully, like, you kind of stabilize and get back to your set point of, like, the level of tolerance withdrawal you were in, and then you go from there. Okay. Let me see what I got here. I'm almost at 28 minutes. I was going to read one of my readings, the True Treasures of Life, but I'll wait till next time for that. Yeah, my throat's getting a little raspy here, and yeah. So anyway, that's what I got for this time. Almost at 28 minutes. So I'm going out later on this afternoon, like for dinner tonight. We're going out for dinner. We very rarely do that on a Sunday. Going to be meeting with a couple people, and it'll be good. We're going to a nice restaurant that it's the place where I usually get chicken nachos, and I don't know if they have them on the weekend or not. I suspect that they do. I know for lunch they don't have those. They have things that are kind of similar, but for dinner during the week, I know they have the chicken nachos, and it's this huge platter of nachos, and they have cheese melted on there, and they have all the lettuce and the tomatoes and the olives and different things. They have really, really good olives on them. It's gigantic. I mean, I've eaten them over the years. I've eaten dozens of them. It's funny when they get a new waitress in there, and like, she'll serve it to me and stuff, and like, she'll come back later and I ate it. She's like, I can't believe you ate that. And I've done it many, many times. It's really, really good. I love it. It's maybe the best chicken nachos I've ever eaten. I've eaten chicken nachos in lots of places. These are they're really, really good. So I'm looking forward to that. Before that, maybe I've got the Sunday paper today. They have extra puzzles in there. I like to sit back on Sunday afternoon and do the puzzles, and maybe, turn the TV on and watch a little bit of something. I don't know, but maybe take a little snooze. I don't know, before we go. I don't know. We'll have to see. Also waiting for the rain. They're calling for quite a bit of rain. So it's been a fairly wet summer this year so far. I'm surprised. Usually July is very, very dry, and the grass turns brown and I don't have to mow it, but that has not been the case this year. It's nice to see green grass. I like it. Vincas are still looking great. It's amazing how they took off. But yeah, so anyway, that's what's going on here. Hope you're having a nice Sunday afternoon, and that things are improving for you. Each day is a day of healing. It really is. That's true. But I know sometimes it feels like nothing's happening, and sometimes, like when you get waves or extra symptoms, you feel like you're going backwards, but you're really not. I mean, you're really not going backwards in this. It just feels that way. It feels like a lot of times you're just not making any sort of progress whatsoever. I remember that I would see people getting windows and stuff and think, like, well, they're getting well, and I'm just staying here sick, and I'm not getting well at all. Yet I knew mentally I am healing, and I would remind myself of that thousands of times every day. I am healing. I am healing. I would say it all the time, even though I didn't necessarily believe it. At a mental level, I sort of did, but I couldn't say I am feeling better. I couldn't say that, but I could say I am healing. And there was something positive about that that did psychologically, it did make a difference for me. It's because I knew it was true, even though it didn't feel like it was true. So anyway, I'll let you go here. I'm over 30 minutes. As always, I'm right here, and I will be right here. Bye-bye.